Today's episode, Josh and I are back to talk about the draft lottery results that we just completed this evening, this Tuesday. East and West Finals predictions from both of us, since we're now into the Eastern and Western Conference Finals. The USA Men's Basketball Olympic update on guys in and guys out and what that looks like in the next coming months for the Olympics. The surprising Kemba Walker and Al Horford trade. This is Josh and I's first thoughts live to that trade. As of today, new offensive player rule where players are going to be penalized or not penalized for their offensive moves. We'll get to more on that. And lastly, Josh has got a half a point lead in trivia. Let's find out if he can keep it next.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Two Pointers podcast. My name is Josh.
I'm Trevor.
And we're glad to have you back as we come to you from draft lottery night, the night with a lot of hope and a lot of time to crush teams' dreams as they see that they have not jumped to the top four in the lottery. Before we get into that, how are you doing today, Trev?
I am doing great on this late Tuesday evening. The draft lottery is always fun. You and I are basketball nerds, and we care about the draft lottery more than most. And because, of course, it's basically the final turning point other than the NBA draft combine for the draft, of course, which is out the way. I'm super excited.
Being a Hornets fan, I have reason to be invested in the draft lottery almost every year. So,
being one half of a co-host of a podcast, I have to care too. So that's about it. Never mind. All right. So I want to open up with this before we roll into the draft lottery results, because that's obviously fresh on the mind. Just wanted to make sure I mentioned this. Our good friend of the podcast and first ever and only guest so far, that hopefully will change here soon. Mr. Nick Levere has released a trailer for the documentary series on NABL. Just wanted to make sure I give a shout out to Nick for that. Look forward to seeing that documentary and what it brings for the shape of the league for them. Josh, draft lottery results. Let's roll right into it because we've got a lot to cover. This is going to be a fun day, fun night, and I'm looking forward to it.
All right, we'll just get started from the top. The Detroit Pistons won the NBA draft lottery, and before I do a summary of everything else that was the picks, if you've been listening to the podcast, you're going to know that I'm definitely going to ask Trevor what he thinks right now of the Detroit Pistons getting the number one overall pick. And let's be honest, drafting Cade Cunningham first overall in the NBA draft.
Funny enough, you mentioned that. Woj has tweeted that Cade Cunningham will be working out for one team.
Yeah.
And that's the Detroit Pistons. So presumably, unfortunately, I hate when this happens. I love when number one overall picks are not clear cut. It's rare in every sport, honestly. But here's an example where it's definitely not. Is this where I start rolling into Detroit, or are you just going to go through the lottery results first?
Well, I'll recap the rest of the
go ahead.
Order, and we can get to it. Second picking will be Houston, who had the worst record in the NBA this year. They're clocking in at number 2. The Cleveland Cavaliers had their name picked in the lottery again. I believe more than any franchise in NBA history to be selected in the lottery. The Cavaliers continue to get picks there. The Toronto Raptors jump up to number 4. The Orlando Magic fell out to number 5 despite being in the top 4 of odds. Oklahoma City Thunder, not a good night for them. They had several lottery projections that would have allowed them to have 2 picks in the top 5. They were only picked at number 6 in the draft lottery. The Golden State Warriors get the pick from Minnesota at number 7. The Orlando Magic get another pick at number 8 from Chicago. Number 9 is Sacramento, 10 New Orleans, 11 Charlotte, 12 San Antonio, 13 Indiana, and 14 Golden State. That last 9 through 14 went in order of record. Things went normally. Trevor, what are your thoughts on the lottery and especially up at the top of the board?
Well, I'm going to lose the Detroit Pistons fans very early in this podcast.
You lost them months ago.
Yeah. At least for this episode, I'm going to lose whoever's left. Am I going to say another nice thing about them the rest of this podcast? Absolutely not. However, this could be a turning point for their franchise?
Yeah.
Question mark. And here's why I say that. This is with immense hesitation. Unless I'm just not remembering someone, Detroit has never picked at number one. If they have, it was really early on in the draft era. I obviously am pulling completely off of memory there. Shame on my draft knowledge that I like to put money on. But however,
looking it up.
Regardless, I don't think I'm forgetting anybody. Regardless, there's been a lot of picks in Detroit's history. Obviously, Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, guys like that. I get it, right? But what I'm getting at is this has been probably the most tantalizing draft prospect in terms of potential talent, potential impact on the league, potential impact on a franchise because of what we already think and know going into, him being assumptively the first pick. Detroit's got a potential here to have a generational star, a generational guy that we, look at, we're looking at LaMelo the same way, Luka the same way, guys like that. This is an opportunity for Detroit not to ruin his career. And I say that, and this is where the part I would lose the Detroit Pistons fans. Don't do it like you have everyone else. Like, focus on player development. This is all, and I don't want to destroy them. I really don't. But they haven't shown me success of developing young players. And I say young because, player development in the 80s is a lot different player development now. It's a lot more thorough. It's a lot more thought after. It's a lot more developed, no pun intended. And how they develop him is going to shape how they develop themselves as a franchise for the next 15 years. And I could be laughing at myself a year later thinking, well, here they are picking at number one again because they were so bad, or maybe 5 years from now because Cade 4 years later sucks and wants out or whatever, or it says it sucks and wants out. So yeah, just at the top, I'm as a rooting interest, I'm not shocked that it was Detroit. It was, to me, Detroit, Houston, or Orlando were the three, obviously the three at 14%. None of them would have shocked me.
So coming back in on the Detroit thing, they've actually had 2 number one picks in history. They were back in 1967 and 1970. 1967, they selected Jimmy Walker.
Yeah.
First overall.
Jalen Rose's father, supposedly, or Jalen Rose's father. So yes, that was prior to the lottery era.
Who would be who was coming off being the NCAA scoring leader that year. And in 1970, they selected Bob Lanier.
Yep.
In the more common draft history, they've had 2 number 2 overall picks. Isaiah Thomas being one in the most recent. So Cade Cunningham, assuming that the Pistons draft him. So when they draft first, it will be the highest pick they've had since 2003, which is going to hurt a lot of Detroit Pistons fans if you remember who they selected in 2003. Do you remember, Trevor?
Well, I do. Darko Milicic.
Yes. And if you don't know who Darko Milicic is, that's okay.
You should.
A good reason you don't.
You should, but you don't.
It's definitely okay you don't. He didn't work out. He was picked right in between LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony, I believe, that went third, and then Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh went next.
Yeah. All-time bad move by whoever. I think Joe Dumars was officially the GM at that time. So regardless, whoever.
That being said, Pistons fans, I will defend you in saying, your franchise has been very good in the past, and I think there's a lot of opportunity to build around Cade Cunningham and Killian Hayes here. Unfortunately, Killian Hayes, a guy with a lot of talent who got hurt and kind of struggled with injuries through his rookie season. Work through those guys. I don't think it's the worst thing if the Pistons are picking one again next year. You're going to want to spend some time because essentially you're going to be running back Killian Hayes almost like a rookie again, coming off this weird season, coming off being hurt. It'll be like a first year actually getting on the court for him. And then Cade Cunningham be his first year. I don't think it's the worst thing if they're picking high again, pick high and get another guy. And build around that. I think there's a lot of good opportunity here with the Pistons. That being said, if they pick someone other than Cade Cunningham, that's the worst possible decision that could be made.
Yeah. I'm going to spend 20 minutes destroying them if they do. My point being, to finalize my thoughts on Detroit, is to be clear to Pistons fans. Obviously, historically, the Pistons are in the upper echelon of the league in terms of success, in terms of just success, actually. That's the only word I have for it. But, however, in the last basically 15 years, Andre Drummond's your best lottery pick. That's it. That's bad. And that's where I think this is that turning piece, because assuming Cade turns out the way he should, the way we think, the way we all hope and believe, you're going to want to be able to focus on this. And ultimately, it's going to be a slow rebuild. And I say slow, super, super slowly, because out of all the other franchises that are in this mode where, and we'll get to some of them at some point in the next month or so with the draft coverage, some of these teams are going to take these leverage of these young guys and picks, but Cade's literally all they have. Killian Hayes obviously is going to develop into a good player, but hopefully ultimately. But they're going to it's going to be Detroit Pistons fans are going to be sad for a little while here, because it's going to be a gradual, this guy here, this guy there, maybe a nice veteran signing in the offseason, but that's it. It's going to take time, and this is the start of a full rebuild.
And I think they're also in a tough spot I empathize with as a Charlotte fan, that it's not a favorable free agency destination that players often want to go to. And I think that cuts into, you've got to build through the draft. It's always your best chance. But I mean, it's a win for tonight for the Pistons. It's a draft where the number one pick is clear to everyone. And I think the number one pick in this draft, I mean, it's like the Zion draft. We all know who's going number one. It just came down to who won the lottery. I have a couple more points for different parts of this lottery that I want to talk about, just a couple of different talking points that I find interesting. The next one is, while I'm certain about Cade Cunningham going first, I'm not completely certain what Houston's going to do at number 2. I think that they were in love with picking Cade Cunningham, but given that Evan Mobley is kind of the consensus second best player, what is a team like Houston that already has Christian Wood on roster and seems to really, really like having him on the team, kind of in their big man set, and that has in the past not liked running big men in their lineups? They traded Clint Capella away for very little. Does a team like the Rockets pick a 7-foot center at the number 2 pick?
Assuming that they have two eyes and a brain that works, they probably ultimately do, because he's talented. And talent, I think right now in this era of the NBA, trumps all. However, if I'm insert Houston Rockets GM here, I actually don't know who it is. I'm taking Suggs or Green. I say Suggs because I'm high on Suggs, but one of the two guards that are available. Similar to what you're saying in terms of the point of the big man. Ultimately, do they think they're getting 30 points a game and another Tracy McGrady type run out of Kevin Porter Jr.? Absolutely not. However, they want him to be part of the franchise long term. They've made that clear. They kept him around regardless of the off-court issues like we've talked about before. I think you take, regardless of Evan Mobley's talent, and you said this in a speculative way. I'm going to say this in a more assertive manner. I'm not sure Mobley's the second best player in this draft. I can get torched on Twitter for the next month, and I'll divulge more into that when we get closer to draft time. But I agree with you. I don't think he's the surefire. If it's any other team there, yes, he probably goes to. Orlando maybe being the only one, because Mo Bamba's not it. But yeah, I agree with you. I'd hate to sit here and be like, oh man, well look, we don't disagree in any way, but we're going to more the closer we get to the draft, right? The more we start to find out about these teams, and I'll get to my next point after you're done. But yeah, I agree with you in that sense. I think a guard like Green or like Suggs is a really big surprise too, if that happens. And I think I wouldn't be shocked if Houston's the team to do something like that.
I didn't mean it, I guess, to be speculative. I firmly think that Mobley's the second best player in this draft. I think it's a 1-2, and then I don't really know. But I don't know. I like Mobley, and I don't think the size and athleticism he has, combined with the fact that he has a lot of skill already for that size and athleticism, guys go in the lottery with his size and athleticism without much well-defined skill. He has well-defined skill and was on a very good. He was a big part of a very good USC team last year. Yeah, I would go with Mobley, but I think that's an interesting question to see where Houston lines up, because to me, it shouldn't be murky about who goes at number 2, but I feel like a team like Houston, who normally doesn't invest in going for the big man recently. You and I talked about off air about how guys like Yao Ming and Hakeem Olajuwon, historically done really well picking a big man to build the franchise around. But recently, since going to the all-in on small ball, it hasn't been their thing.
Don't get me wrong. If Evan Mobley is the second overall pick and he has Akeem Olajuwon as his mentor, that's best case scenario if you're every party involved. And I ultimately think that's probably why he goes to. Moving on to, I really don't have anything else other than my next point, because the draft lottery, ultimately fans know this, like it's speculative. It's all right now, other than one, of course. It's speculative in the sense that now we know at least what to expect from these teams. And now we have a month in this case to get to a point where this might not be obviously the final set order. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the last point I wanted to get into, I feel like for the most part, these teams are going to be picking how they are, except for at number 7. Do you think Golden State's going to be picking at number 7? Or are they going to trade that pick in the next month?
It's funny you asked me that because I have gone back and forth the last 48 hours on what I think a lot of teams are going to do. This is even prior to the draft lottery. And now that I've had maybe an hour and a half to divulge this, I don't think Golden State picks at 7. Shockingly, though, I don't really know what they do. I'm torn because they're clearly wanting to engage in something that's going to have a Steph, a hopeful returning Klay Thompson after 2 horrible injuries for almost 3 full years of time off. Draymond Green, who's, on the wrong side of 30 or getting close to the wrong side of 30, and Wiseman, who they are going to obviously focus on and develop. I don't think they're missing one piece and that's it for them. I really don't. I ultimately think it's similar to how the D'Angelo Russell move ended up for Brooklyn. Woj made a great point on the NBA Countdown show prior to the draft lottery about, the D'Angelo Russell situation going to Brooklyn. It made it more inviting for guys like KD and Kyrie in Brooklyn as an example. Obviously, there's other examples out there, but I truly don't know what the Warriors are going to do. I don't know what Bob Myers is up to. My guess would be that they probably stay at 7 and ultimately leverage, the Minnesota pick. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. That's actually not the question or the speculation that I came up with, but it's interesting that you asked that because it's such a toss up.
So it's interesting that you say that they're going to focus around developing and building with James Wiseman, because there's been so much smoke around a package deal of this first round, this lottery pick, which they got fairly high at 7, and James Wiseman being traded, that Joe Lacob had to come out and say that he thinks it's unlikely they're going to trade James Wiseman. There was so much smoke around Wiseman being traded that he wanted to come make a statement. I'm a proponent of where there's smoke, there's fire. And I think there is something more to this Wiseman thing. But at the same time, there were a million Golden State trade talks for the number 2 pick in November, and they didn't trade it. So it's hard to tell where they're going to go here, if they're going to end up making that deal or not. There probably is more to this Wiseman rumors and trade talks. At first, I thought it was crazy as well. But considering how much talk there was last year around trading the number 2 pick that they eventually took Wiseman with, I personally can't believe that Golden State is like completely bonded to James Wiseman, because frankly, that number 7 pick, James Wiseman and maybe a couple other players, is a really good trade package that could pull somebody really good for Golden State to play with Steph.
So I'm not going to sit here and speculate on Golden State Warriors trades, because I really do. I agree with you that it could be more, because when the smoke clears, no pun intended, we're going to see ultimately up until the draft is over. I think they are draft night eligible for something, in my opinion, but I don't think Wiseman's involved. And I know that sounds ridiculous. The reason I say that is because we know he's talented and we know that he has potential. And I think they're willing to do that because they have to think here. Steph is in now early 30s. Klay is now early 30s. Draymond's now early 30s. This core of pieces that gave them such a great run, they're going to have to hope they're not going to get a number 2 overall pick for a while again until they're bad, until Steph's gone. So I think that's ultimately part of the reason. Also, 10 months prior to the draft, Wiseman was the consensus number 1 overall pick. And then obviously narratives and things shift. he's still obviously the second overall pick. He's still the second best player in that draft, or in terms of thought to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down the line. We're going to developly see how that turns out as someone like you knows. So my point being, the Warriors are not where I want to speculate, because this is my last thing I have, because honestly, after 6, it really ultimately 7 maybe doesn't really matter yet. I think Oklahoma City, due to the fact that they have so much draft capital, and I don't want to spend forever on OKC because, like I said, I want to spend more time on this in pre-draft and post-draft. Cleveland is not staying at 3. Oklahoma City is not staying at 6, and they're probably the 2 that moved with each other. And I have 2 reasons for it, and that this is completely nothing I've read based on the speculation of these 2 in a trade, but this is solely my opinion as a basketball person and fan, and how much I've watched over the years and seen how things like this have happened. Oklahoma City is not happy there at 6. That's not a secret.
No.
The fact that they probably had to hold Sam Presti back from going live tonight. And Cleveland doesn't want to pay Colin Sexton, and they know that they have value in Colin Sexton because he came off a really good year. And whether they have a turning point, all the reports have been they just don't want to pay him. Whether I agree with that or not, whether I think that's the dumbest thing I've heard in a long time, he's a great player. I don't know if he's worth what he might be worth, like they're saying. It might be a good idea. But 3 in Colin Sexton is a very, very big, valuable push. And then Oklahoma City also has 16, I believe, and 18. 18, I know. Grayson and I were talking about it. I mentioned him before, Oklahoma City Thunder fan of ours. I have been open about how I think Cleveland, ultimately, by the way, luckiest franchise of all in terms of draft reasoning. You mentioned that they're actually the most number 1 overall picks ever, as well as I think I want to say it's 6 of them, and also the most lottery selections ever by quite a margin. But that is my speculation trade or speculation move that I think happens, honestly, prior to draft. Oklahoma City leverages the fact that they want a guy in this top 3. Who it is, I couldn't tell you.
That's interesting. I think I really agree from the sense of I don't think it makes sense for Cleveland to be picking Jalen Suggs or Jalen Green, given that they have Colin Sexton and Darius Garland. But I think in your scenario, if they were going to trade Colin Sexton, then it makes all the sense in the world to draft Jalen Green or Jalen Suggs. So that part just doesn't fit together as well. I don't think they should get rid of Colin Sexton. They came across something really good this year with Sexton and Garland together. It's just my personal thought. I don't see a reason to get rid of a young guy that's really good after 3 years, but
the Athletics reported on it multiple times. Sexton apparently locker room wise might not be the guy, just leadership wise. I'm not a reporter in the locker room. I'm not going on record about that. My point being is they're the only 2 teams that make sense to move right now to me. Toronto has no reason to try to just leverage future. Minnesota has no reason to leverage future. Chicago maybe can just say we're this one next big guy piece away, because after Vucevic trade, Levine's obviously only going to get better. Kobe White's going to get better. They have potential there, but I think they're way further away from one top 3 pick away. Sacramento, no. There's just really, after that, it really doesn't make a difference. I don't see. San Antonio is obviously not notorious for trading up and things. So, yeah, ultimately, those 2 are the ones that are just staring me in the face when I look at this result, and I go, they're moving, and it's probably with each other. I don't see them. I just don't see what happens unless it's a team way out of the lottery that's just ready to get rolling and get up to the top. But that would be a huge haul. And I think Sexton's enough value now, not being paid by the Cavs yet, that something's going to happen. It's a matter of when, in my opinion.
All right, let's roll into the conference finals. We're down to our last 4. We've got Phoenix Suns and the Los Angeles Clippers out west. At time of the recording, Suns lead 1-0 on the series. I'm not looking at the score of the game that's being played right now, so I don't know how that's going. And then we will have the Milwaukee Bucks and the Atlanta Hawks starting on Wednesday, which is tomorrow night for Trevor and I. Trevor, what are your thoughts or the latest on Suns Clippers? Because you obviously seem to be signaling you're watching something.
I'm just keeping an eye on it, of course. Cameron Payne, through the beginning of the third quarter here, has 16 points and is being, as I told some of our NBA fans and friends off recording, Cameron Payne is the X factor for not only this game but the rest of the series. As sickening as that might be to Bulls fans, they're looking good. The Clippers are looking looking with a new tenacity on defense. They're just seem to be bringing it a little bit more aggressive. I think if Phoenix gets this done at home, ultimately my prediction, I'm not spending forever on this series. I have a lot more to say on Bucks Hawks. Just shout out Devin Booker for his first career triple-double, coming in his first Western Conference Finals for basically the last 6 years of his career, to basically we thought he was going to rot in Phoenix, and here he is showing out like that. Stephen A. Smith's comparison to Kobe was a little lash, but I don't entirely disagree. But ultimately, the loss of Kawhi, I think, is going to be what is detrimental for the Clippers in this series. I have Suns in 5.
Yeah, I was going to come on and say Clippers with Kawhi, and I'm taking the Clippers. Because I had said when we back when we did our playoff review, I thought the Clippers, in my mind, were the second best team behind Utah, and they just beat Utah. But with Kawhi Leonard hurt, I think Suns in 6, because I think Chris Paul is going to be back before the end of the series. I don't think Kawhi Leonard's going to be back before the end of the series.
No, Kawhi's injury, there's just too much uncertainty and unknown right now. Obviously, we were waiting for swelling to go down, but that was 5 days ago now.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like swelling might go down in 5 days and get an MRI done. It was supposed to have been done yesterday. So I think that's just ultimately holding back the news that it is over for Kawhi. Obviously, sooner rather than later for recovery reasons. We want to get him back out on the floor. It's not good anytime you see a guy like that go down. I had noted to make sure I mentioned that even without Chris Paul, I'm not shocked with the momentum of the Suns team, and that's literally the only reason, in my opinion, that if, like I said, I have Suns in 5, but I'm also not surprised that, in about a week, if there's brooms brought out in LA, because they're just so hot right now and they're not going to stop. And I don't think Paul George and a hobbled Marcus Morris are enough. With Kawhi, this series probably goes 7.
Hey, I mean, Suns in 4, right?
Suns in 4. That's hilarious that you tied that in. Anything else on Suns Clippers before we roll into Bucks Hawks? I can't believe I'm saying that.
No, I don't.
Bucks Hawks.
Let's go to Bucks
Literally.
Hawks, the most unlikely conference finals.
The Hawks, the Atlanta freaking Hawks.
Well, I want to take a step back, and I'm going to pat myself on the back for predicting for the last 6 months that the Milwaukee Bucks would take out the Brooklyn Nets in the NBA playoffs. So, yeah, I called that. That was me.
All right, Josh,
I was
where do I
wrong
start?
on the Jazz shirt, but I mean that's
yeah. Well, we can just move past the Jazz. That's okay. I feel like I was right on that, but it is what it is. They shouldn't have lost. So I don't know where to start with this series. I'm going to start with this, however. This is where I'll start, and we'll keep rolling, because I'm sure you've got plenty to say. The Bucks have been a statistical anomaly and nightmare for teams this playoff so far. They beat Miami in 4, for a recap for anybody that might not have watched, and they beat Brooklyn in 7 in a very grueling series. In a very they were down 2-0, just seemed like nothing was going their way. And then I came on here and said Bucks in 7, and defensively I thought it was going to be the reason. That's what it came down to.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my biggest reason. Ultimately, I'm going to side with the better defensive team. I'm going to side with the better team on paper across the board with a 2-time MVP, and here's why. Josh, you might not have known this, or some of this, or all of this, but here we go. The Bucks, through the 4 games with Miami and the 7 games with Brooklyn, are first in rebounds per game with 51. They are 5th in net rating. This is 5th in terms of all the playoff teams, so like 1st, 5th, whatever. 5th in net rating with 5.7. They're first in defensive rating with 102.8. They were 4.5 ahead of the next team. Fast break points per game, they're 5th with 12.9. Second chance points, they're 4th with 15. Points in the paint per game, they're 4th with 48. Field goal percentage on drives, they're 3rd with 51%. They're 5th in plus minus with plus 10. And the most important of them all, points allowed per game. They're second and with 102.3. That is almost every statistic that is logged for the playoffs that NBA.com has posted. And they're top 5 in everything. They are getting healthy at the right time in terms of no one's really out right now other than Dante DiVincenzo. They are ready for this series. I have Bucks in 5. Hesitantly, wouldn't be surprised if it's 6, but Bucks in 5.
Yeah, I think that makes – I mean, none of that really surprises me with Milwaukee. It's interesting because we're taking – the defensive juggernaut is taking on the offensive juggernaut, really. I mean, the Atlanta Hawks offense has been incredibly fun for me to watch and has amazed me throughout the playoffs that it's taken them this far. But that's what they're getting along with, right? Like we called earlier in the series, how long does the Hawks offense keep plugging along? Apparently a long ways. They keep draining threes. I mean, Trae Young played badly in Game 7 against Philly, and they still won. He had made 2 shots before the fourth quarter from the field. He'd taken like 17. The Bucks offense all around is great, but now they're facing a defensive team that has shut down every offense they've come across. Really, every player outside of Kevin Durant, who, I mean, is, I think, probably the best player in the game of basketball today. He would win MVP awards if he played an entire regular season, but he doesn't, so we don't get that as much. But yeah, I think then you have to look what the key is going to be as you flip the other side of the ball. How are the Atlanta Hawks going to defend? Just how are they going to defend Giannis and Chris Middleton?
How are they going to defend?
Like taking everyone else out, I can't think of a plan where they can guard those two before you even get to everyone else.
How are they going to defend, period? I mean, I feel like you're delaying the inevitable. Just say Bucks in 5. Just say it.
I was getting
no, it's there.
5. Yeah,
I knew it was there. It was hanging in the balance.
I think Trae Young will score 51 game and Atlanta will pull through. One of those 2 games in Atlanta, and then the Bucks will finish it off back in Milwaukee.
Funny. So, yeah, otherwise for me, I can't find a reason to pick the Hawks outside of the fact that they just can't miss. I mean, yes, Trae had a bad Game 7, but they are right now, I want to say I saw this yesterday. I can't remember where I saw this, but they are right now in top 15 in terms of most efficient shooting playoff runs of all time. Yeah. And they look like a Miami team last year that, going into the bubble where we're like, we didn't think they were going to make the finals, and much less take the Lakers to 6, but they were a lot better than they feared. But however, they were a defensive team, and so were the Bucks. So, Josh, anything else before we keep on rolling? Because we've got a lot to cover tonight. Next, I think, is what? USA Olympic team. Yeah,
let's get to Team USA and why the USA men's basketball medal in the Olympics has already been decided. So, as of today, the players confirmed to play on Team USA in the Olympics are the Portland Trail Blazers' Damian Lillard, the Milwaukee Bucks' Drew Holiday, the Phoenix Suns' Devin Booker, the Brooklyn Nets' James Harden, the Washington Wizards' Bradley Beal, the Boston Celtics' Jason Tatum, the Brooklyn Nets' Kevin Durant, the Milwaukee Bucks' Chris Middleton, the Cleveland Cavaliers' Kevin Love, the Golden State Warriors' Draymond Green, the Miami Heat's Bam Adebayo. There will be a few more players to fill that team out, but that team's going to win the gold medal.
Was that 12? Have we officially come to 12?
That is 11.
All right, so we're barring a 12th.
I think they'll probably take a team of 15, if I were to guess.
So the roster ultimately that we're going to hear about on social media is going to be 12. They will take 15 because of subs, and it's this complicated, the roster thing with the Olympics. Ultimately, the 12 is what matters.
Mm-hmm. It might not be these 11 in that 12.
It's true.
I think a lot of them will be there.
Most of them will.
Yeah. I think you're looking at your Draymond Greens and your Kevin Loves kind of on the line.
Probably.
Making that team. I like having Draymond Green on the team. I question some with Kevin Love, but.
So, hilariously enough, I think the team that did make it, at least so far, might be better than the team that didn't make it. And that's not why we're here, but just to name a few. LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Steph Curry, Kyrie Irving, Jimmy Butler, Donovan Mitchell, Chris Paul, who just today announced he will not go. I was very surprised by the Chris Paul one. This is probably his final Olympic run, and I'm just surprised. I'm ultimately surprised. I think the next time we see Chris Paul in some form related to the Olympics is as a coach.
Yep.
Quote me on that 8 years from later, listeners. Zion Williamson, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Trae Young, Mike Conley, Zach LaVine, Julius Randle, Jaylen Brown, to name a few. All of them. Josh, you already answered this.
I'm just going to ask you guys that aren't going.
Just as I just wanted to make sure that those guys got mentioned as soon as they could go if they were either healthy or available or good enough. So
plenty are healthy and available, but they're just not going.
They're just not going. Steph Curry, cough, cough.
LeBron.
Yeah, sure. So ultimately, why are we here on this Olympic segment? No, the question I had for you, and you've already addressed it hilariously enough. Josh, does the U.S. team go home with gold?
If they don't, then
of course they do, right?
Basketball is a much more global, better sport than I thought.
Okay, and if not, then who?
If the USA doesn't, then who? Cop-out answer is to say Spain. They were the last winners of the World Cup. They usually get very good participation from their countrymen. Now, given Spain is a very old team for their best players, they rely a large amount on the Gasol brothers and Ricky Rubio, and that's kind of tapering to the end. The team I liked a lot, if all the players were there, is I think Greece could ride the Antetokounmpos a long way. But Greece is on a last chance qualifier right now, or about to start it, and Giannis and Thanasis are still playing in the NBA playoffs, so I don't think Greece is going to be able to qualify.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. I would say maybe if there even is, and I'll be honest with you, I don't track Olympic basketball until about a week before the Olympics, but I would be shocked if a Luka Doncic led Eastern European team, but just
I don't think that
I don't think they made it either.
I don't think Luka's playing for Slovenia. And
okay, well they're not. They're definitely not making it. That shows you how little that I think this matters.
I don't think I think the top three teams are the U.S., Spain, and France. France is in our group, ironically enough, and the team that knocked us out of the FIBA World Cup. The team that would be second best, and it wouldn't even be a question if their best players would play, is Canada.
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of the best players don't go.
It's a shame. It really is.
Canada's got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, R.J. Barrett, Andrew Wiggins, Jamal Murray, who's injured at the moment.
Of course.
And just a ton of other guys that are coming out of the country. In the future, I think maybe those guys decide to put on the colors for Canada, go compete in the Olympics. And their team could be very good. But at the moment, when they're just not filling that roster out, I think it's going to continue to be the U.S. and some of the more athletically elite European countries, your Spain, your Europe, your Italy, that invest in it quite a lot.
Ultimately, right, like I said, a month out, not necessarily too much to cover, but just know that we will be on it come Olympic time, and we will be staying up for whatever ungodly time difference there is between.
It's not staying up, you'll be waking up early.
Waking up. See, I knew there was something I was missing.
I remember watching Beijing. The games probably start at 6 a.m. our time.
Yeah, well, we will be on it, even if it's pre-recorded, but we will be there, and we will be able to get that, our opinion out there and ready for everybody. Josh, this is what people really came to see, not the Olympics. Are you ready? Are you ready for this? This is what they came to. They know how we feel about these two teams and people. Are you ready for the Kemba Walker and Al Horford deal? This is the first time, believe it or not, this is the first time we've had a chance to cover it.
Yeah.
It's wild. You want me to run through it first in case somebody hasn't caught it yet?
Yeah, okay.
Briefly here, the Boston Celtics have traded Kemba Walker, the 16th overall pick in 2021 in this year's draft, 2025 second-round pick, to Oklahoma City for Al Horford, the same Al Horford that was a Boston Celtic not too long ago, Moses Brown, and a 2023 second-round pick per Adrian Wojnarowski. Before you say another word, because I know I'm excited to hear this. No explanation yet. Who won this trade?
OKC.
Now begin.
I was debating a long time whether I start this just an objective analysis of the trade, or if I talk about Kemba Walker specifically, because I can't be unbiased given that I'm a fan of the Charlotte Hornets and Kemba Walker is the best player in the history of our franchise. Or if I talk about the Boston Celtics' recent history when it comes to point guards. I think I'll talk about all three of them, but we'll just run in an order. When Kemba Walker signed with the Boston Celtics 2 years ago, my prediction was that he would be traded in February of 2022. I was a little bit off. I didn't think he would make it past. I didn't think he would make it 3 years. I knew he wasn't going to finish that contract in Boston. I was surprised it came this early. It makes sense with a management change that it came now. I hate for Kemba that the trade's coming on the back of the fact that he's having knee issues, which is frankly what it came down to. Because this year when he was healthy, he was really good. Wasn't healthy a lot. Was the only problem. Boston, it only makes sense they're doing this to free up cap space because they sent Kemba Walker and they sent their first round pick. And for a team like Boston that you and I have talked about, it's Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and then it's nobody to have sent away their first round pick. If they don't somehow hit a home run in free agency with this money they're freeing up, then I don't know what they're doing at all. The next part is, am I crazy or does Boston have a point guard problem? Because let me go down the list of players. And now I'm not going to speculate on what Kemba Walker's feelings are toward Boston. It's early for us to find out what it is. But point guards from the Boston Celtics in recent years who have negative opinions of the Boston Celtics. Rajon Rondo, Isaiah Thomas, Kyrie Irving, Terry Rozier, and now Kemba Walker has been traded away. Those are 5 prominent point guards. Of the results we know of, 3 of those 4 have gone on to do better things outside of Boston. In Rondo, Irving, and Rozier. Isaiah Thomas fell off in his career because of injuries, and now we don't know where Kemba Walker goes. Do the Celtics have a real point guard problem?
So is that my first question I'm answering before I say anything? Of course they do. In terms of, and I think their point guard problem has nothing to do with the past 4 guys you just mentioned. Their point guard problem is from here on forward. As of right now, Aaron Nesmith or Peyton Pritchard are starting at point guard, or Marcus Smart, God forbid, are starting at point guard for the Boston Celtics. At this point, just let Jason Tatum play point guard. That's really, just let him be Magic Johnson. Like, really, at this point, 6'11", 6'9", whatever, right? It doesn't matter. Where do I begin? Because there's so much there that you mentioned that you have to unpack. You're sitting down. Listeners can't see it. You're sitting down. Stay seated for this. I completely disagree with you on who won this trade. Only because we don't know what the next 4 years holds, and here's why. Ultimately, the 16th overall pick was the highest value thing in this trade in terms of potential. It's a 16th overall pick, though. Let's cut the crap. It's a 16th overall pick.
Before you keep going, I'm going to make one point.
Go ahead.
What pick was Giannis Antetokounmpo?
He wasn't 16. He was 15, wasn't he?
15.
It was 15. Okay.
What's the difference?
My point being.
Okay.
My point being, no, not a lottery pick, right? The pick's not even what I'm bringing up. It's the fact that this is the same Kemba Walker, and this is no disrespect to Kemba Walker. You know I'm not going to do this to you. But it's the same Kemba Walker that missed a total of about 30 games in his, 8 years in Charlotte?
Yep.
He missed 30 in every season in his time in Boston, 30 or more. 30 total in 8 years to 30 every year for Boston. Here's why, ultimately, I think Boston won this trade. For 2 reasons, and 2 reasons only. They are saving a lot of money that they hopefully can use. And they've proven, even in Danny Ainge's, we're going to say roller coaster, and I'm going to move on. Roller coaster of a time in Boston. He being Brad Stevens, has capitalized on the fact that they're going to very briefly save $9 million this year. The season we just finished, they're saving $9 million $11.2 million next year, and then only 14.5 of Horford's 26.5 million is guaranteed in the 22-23 season. By the way, this is the same, like I mentioned a moment ago, the same Al Horford that Danny Ainge let walk for nothing. Regardless, I think if they can capitalize on the value of the money saved versus the fact that Oklahoma City is just another pick in the wind for them, they really just did it because they got the 16th pick. And then here's why I think this could be swung completely in the other direction. At this moment, the Celtics won the trade to me. In 4 years, if Kemba Walker, or in a year, God forbid, or however long, if I'm using 4 years as a timetable for this trade because of the second round picks, if Kemba Walker is traded in the next 2 years or in the next couple months for something bigger and better, then of course the Thunder won the trade. But just hindsight being 2020, what we're looking at right now, I can't talk myself out of the fact that I really do think they won the trade. And I'm so glad we disagreed on something for the first time in about a month.
So I would argue that it's just as much a thing of, because you're essentially saying the only way Oklahoma City won the trade, it's like they've got the opportunity. What do they do with it? I think it's kind of the same thing with Boston. They freed up the money. Okay.
Got to roll with it. You got to be able to do something on it.
You got to
exactly
do something with that.
Absolutely.
And you got to hope that Horford really can still be the big man that Brad Stevens wanted him to be. I'm still not convinced he's the answer there.
No. Short term, no. Or long term, no. But short term, yes.
Short term, maybe.
This trade is scary how speculative it really is. Like, it's crazy that this trade is probably going to change opinions of fans for like the next, in terms of what we think of it in the next 4 years, 5 years. Yeah. Because, I mean, who knows? 2023 second turns into the next MVP or something. I mean, crazy. We don't know, of course. At the end of the day, it's awesome that we finally disagreed. I'm glad we finally got to talk about it. And sorry to Boston fans, we at least got to drag you for a little bit through the mud. Now go out and find your head coach.
Sorry
because as of right now,
that I just constantly drag the Celtics. I've been bitter about Kemba Walker leaving for the past 2 years.
Look, it's fine. It's fine. Basketball's an emotional game. It is.
I'll fully admit that's the reason. That's 100% the only reason.
Lastly, on the Celtics, as of right now, it seems like it's Billups and Ham and one other assistant. It seems like Hammond is very, very clearly impressing the Portland Trailblazers. We've been tying those two coaches together for the last 2.5, 3 weeks. But as of right now, both teams are down to less than 5. Blazers are down to 2 or 3. Celtics are down to basically Billups and everyone else. So there still could be some shockwaves. I get it, but it seems like it's going to be Billups in Boston, Hammond in Portland, which is what ultimately Josh and I wanted. Josh, you ready for the new NBA rule change? Which,
oh my gosh, I almost forgot about this.
Scary to think that this is something that could change the shape of the game of basketball forever? Question mark?
Drastically.
Well,
like,
am I rolling into it?
Yeah, just give the.
Let's roll. Let's go. No, you're good. Let's go.
Say what the rule is before I say anything.
This new rule for the listeners will be put in place to limit non-basketball moves that would result in an offensive foul or no call starting this year. This year being the year we're coming up on, not anything to do with this playoffs, of course. The NBA referees will go through extensive training on proper officiating of the following. 1, shooter launching / leaning into defender at abnormal angle. Think kick, actually technically not a kick. So think like going down the baseline, throwing up a shot, jumping into the guy, basically. 2, and that's why I held kickoff for a second. Shooter kicks leg at abnormal angle. Think Trae Young, James Harden, etc. We'll get into that. And lastly, offensive player, and I think we'll get to why this one is so impactful. Offensive player abruptly veers off path, sideways or backwards into defender. Before you say anything, I love asking you questions, and you know that by now. We've learned that. I think this is a really good angle on how you should think about this if you haven't already. Josh, is ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, is this rule a good thing for the NBA? And if it is entirely a good thing, which it always isn't, there's pros and cons, obviously, what negative effects do you see coming from this?
Yes, I think this will ultimately be a good thing. But I think the rule, as it's currently written, is incredibly ambiguous. what is a non-basketball angle or weird angle to jump in to a player? My question is, the one move that I don't think should be made illegal that I'm wondering if it's going to be is the move where a three-point shooter pump fakes, the defender leaves his feet, and the player then jumps in to the defender that is off the floor. If the defender leaves the floor and makes contact with the shooter, whether on their own intention or not, I think it's a foul. As for the other rules, I do like them. I've always thought the leg kick was an offensive foul. I think you can call the abrupt start the Trae Young rule because it's the move that he pulls over and over again to get to the free throw line. He'll drive into the paint with a defender on his back to attempt to block a layup because he's a smaller player, and he'll come to an abrupt stop. The player tumbles in, and that's foul. We're moving to the free throw line. I think how ambiguous it is going to cause problems with fans that are trying to watch and understand what they've seen being shooting fouls for the past 5 years from your Trae Youngs and your James Hardens, because let's be frank, those are the players that have most exploited this rule up to this point in time. And those now being offensive fouls. And then despite this idea, we always hear this extensive training for the referees to determine it. And then whenever these rules come out, I guess I'm thinking of the NFL and rules on what is a catch. It always seems like each referee has a different opinion. And I'm afraid that that's going to happen once the NBA implements this rules, that the different referees are going to have different opinions on what's an offensive foul and which one's a defensive foul. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
So, yeah, I'd hate to sit here and spend 25 minutes talking about how it's going to change two players' games. I think ultimately the third part of that is going to change a lot of people's, because I think what people are seeing this as, they're seeing the James Hardens and Trae Youngs in their heads. They're not thinking about the DeAndre Ayton pump faking, just outside the key or just outside the restricted area and jumping into a guy and trying to get the foul. He's not really a guy that does that. I'm just using him as an example, guy playing in the playoffs at this moment. But I think people are forgetting this isn't just a guard change of a rule, right? Like this is going to implement a lot of different things. And I think ultimately I'm so torn on it because I want this to stop happening. I think it looks stupid if you're a young NBA fan and you're never seen the NBA and you're developing, especially in countries where basketball rules might not be either enforced in their leagues in their youth development area, like over, in Asia and places like that, where basketball is developing in some areas. But the NBA is the second largest reached country in terms of viewers and countries. David Stern made that a point. And you don't want this to be people's first shape of the NBA, where you see a guy like James Harden jump into a guy 4 feet over the three-point line. So you want this to be something that's going to impact. And I brought this up in the next point before I get into it, is this is going to have hopefully and ultimately effect on not just generationally of the NBA, hopefully, if this rule is implemented, even if it's tweaked and changed in little bits, but ultimately the other levels of basketball, colleges, overseas, not rec, obviously, because no one's paying attention in pickup games and stuff for those rules, but youth leagues, et cetera. It's gonna have to prove a point, and it's gonna have to be big enough to make that big of a change. My other thing I would say, though, a lot of people forget a lot of rules of basketball that we know today. Some of them aren't that old. Some of them, we've had major rule changes since 2000. Mm-hmm. You might not know. Do you know what year the NBA allowed zone defense?
What?
Literally the NBA allowed zone defense in 2001 in terms of a 3-second rule for defensive players, in terms of having guys in zone rotating through the 3-second area. Wikipedia, I'm not entirely trusting Wikipedia, but allowed zone. It says when the NBA started to allow zone defense in 2001, regardless if that's not true. A couple other ones being in FIBA, and they reduced the shot clock to 24 seconds in 2000. Now that's FIBA, that's not the NBA. And then also the 2000, they obviously changed where the 8-second rule, crossing the NBA changed that in 2001 as well. So I'll double check the zone defense one at some point.
Yeah, I was going to say zone defense is a scheme. And frankly, it's existed in the NBA for a lot longer since 2001. I
I
think
want to know if
that
this
has
is,
something to do with paint,
it
players in the
has to
paint.
do. I think it does too.
Because you said about rotating players in the paint in 3 seconds. That's a paint rule, which would be a rule.
So this is not okay. So I just went into this further. Zone defenses are common in international college and youth competition. In the National Basketball Association, zone defenses were prohibited until 2001-2002 season, and most teams do not use them as a primary defensive strategy. The NBA has a defensive 3-second rule violation, which makes it more difficult for teams to play zone, since such defenses usually position a player in the middle of the key to stop penetration. So I think the implementation of it is more about the fact that you're right about the 3-second rule. But it says the Dallas Mavericks under former coach, by the way, haven't covered that, and we did not find a way to squeeze it in until just now. Former head coach Rick Carlisle are an example of a team that have regularly used zone defenses even with the new rule change in 2002. Crazy. I didn't realize that. But I only bring that up to say that this is probably going to be, once they get this rule ultimately right, similar to like you mentioned the NFL catch rule, this is going to be a generational change to the league. This is going to be how we see basketball in 30 years, where you don't see guys completely jumping into each other looking stupid.
I think it's a shift.
Shift towards
it's like we're going one direction, it's a turn.
It's similar to when a law or a bill is being developed in the United States. You're going to put things in. I'm just using that as an example to show people this is going to be, you're right. Shift's a great way to put it, because this isn't the first implementation of this. They're going to tweak it. They're going to get it right. It's not going to take them 10. We're only a few months away from October when the new NBA season starts. This training is going to be extensive, I'm sure. Hours of video, hours of, probably on court simulations. There's got to be more to this. This is obviously fresh as of 6 hours ago. So I'm excited to see where this takes the league next year.
Like I said, I want to see how it's going to be implemented, because like I said at the start of talking about this, what I'm confused about, if a player jumps into a defender that has left its feet, I don't understand how that should be a foul why that should not be a foul without placing the offensive player at a supreme disadvantage. If jumping into a defender who has left his feet and getting fouled is an offensive foul, then what is the offensive player supposed to do? Stand there for the guy to come back down and start playing defense again and then take your shot?
So in the original Athletic piece, which unfortunately the Athletic being a paid subscription service, it's hard to obviously read some of their full detailed breakdowns of stuff like this when it's new from people like Shams and John Hollinger. But they are implementing also as part of just the offensive foul. It's not going to be crazy where it's just crazy when the charge block rule came out, where it was I feel like we're getting charges after charges in college because it's officiated differently a little bit in college. But there also is an opportunity for a no call. So the offensive player won't be at a complete disadvantage, but then it's it comes down to that charge block rule. How do you determine it so clearly? I think it's honestly, if they don't get this right in terms of how they teach this and train this, then these video reviews that we're complaining about in the playoffs and the end of the regular season here not too long ago, you and I and a lot of other people, there's going to be even more of them, and they're going to be longer because we're trying to get some Trae Young, 30-footer where he jumps into the defender and try to get it right. So I think at the end of the day, it's a good thing. Whether it's a good thing in 25 years and 50 years and 100 years, I guess we'll live long enough to find out. We'll see what happens.
I will say this. Every major rule change I think that we've seen at some point in basketball and most sports is a result of a great player or coach exploiting a hole in the rule as far as you can take it. We have a shot clock because of Dean Smith. That's the reason there's a shot clock. Because before, Dean Smith coaching North Carolina Tar Heels, if they were up by 7 points with 5 minutes to go, he'd stop shooting. He'd pass the ball around and run the clock out. We have a semicircle into the basket because of Mike Krzyzewski, where he would stand his players when the charge block rule came out to stand directly underneath the basket so that any player attempting a layup would run over and charge one of his players. And it worked, and that's why we have a semicircle zone that can't be taken a charge underneath. Trae Young and James Harden have thoroughly exploited what is a foul to get free throw after free throw after free throw. I respect the game, honestly. Personally, I respect the ability to exploit a hole in the rules to your advantage so thoroughly.
And that's where we are, and that shows you how excited we should be in trusting in this next generation, because every generation has something like that. You have your guys like Shaq, you have your guys like Wilt, and obviously back then there's more big men. You've got your Pistol Petes in college, and these are not legitimate rule changes. Some of these were guys that exploited stuff but never got things done. But ultimately, it's going to happen. That's how we change and develop and get better as a game and as a fan base and as a league, ultimately in the NBA sense. But I really am excited to see how this is implemented outside the NBA, because the NBA is going to be the test for it. And I think the G League is going to be really neat, because I think the G League is going to test it really heavily, like the NBA is using. They're trying to use the G League, obviously. They're trying to make the G League legitimate.
The G League is the test zone for
it. Really is. And that's okay, because minor league baseball is where a lot of, as the parallel example for a minor league, they're trying to use it as a way to make sure they get things ultimately right on the scale that we watch it, which in the NBA's case is in about 168 countries, 165 countries, and a couple billion people a year. It's unreal the reach that this is going to have, and I'm excited to see where it goes beyond the league. Are you ready for trivia? I was going to say, are you ready for trivia? All right. So obviously it's been a long episode here, but no rush in trivia, of course, because we want to make it fair and make sure we all get it right here. I'll be the one editing this podcast, of course, and we'll get that taken care of. Josh, I pulled a you this time. I am tying trivia into this episode. Are you proud of me?
Finally.
Are you proud of me? The ironic part is I found this trivia question on like June 7th, and I just happened to find a way to tie it in. Here is the scoring system before you freak out. There are 1, 2, 3.
For the listeners, Josh is ahead 8.5 to 8.
Correct. I was going to say that at some point when there was like a lull between your answers. I was going to be like, by the way, Josh is up. Half a point. See if you can get another full point here. I am only allowing 1 point. Seriously. No, it's fine. You can do it next week to me. Totally fair. We have talked about a team that you are not so fond of. And this is going to be this is the Boston Celtics named trivia. If our Celtics hasn't made it this far, if they survive Josh's derailing of their franchise, happy to have you for trivia. There are 6 possible answers. You get 9 guesses. Because it's the Boston. Yes. Because it's the Boston Celtics. Seriously. Okay. Like it's the Lakers, it's the Celtics, it's guys, it's teams like that. But this is Celtics specifically. This past year, and you've mentioned a lot of the guys on this list, we've also mentioned them before. Shouldn't be hard. I gave you a little bit of a hint there by accident. There have been some historic Celtics playoff performances. There have been 6 that are on this list that are 49 and above. 49 and above, so 50 and above. I didn't want to say 50 because I feel like that's a dead giveaway. 50 points and above. Playoff points. Points. Sorry, 50 points and above in Celtics playoff history. I feel like that's kind of a dead giveaway on one of them. But you have 9 guesses. You have 6 answers. Go.
Jason Tatum.
Jason Tatum is number 1. That's why I was like, I didn't feel like saying 50, but Tatum is 1.
I'll take the layup to start.
Yeah, you gave me a layup with Melo last week, so that's fair. You see why I'm giving you 9 guesses, 3 more than allowed.
Yeah. I'm going to go with Bill Russell because he's just played so many games. Like you have to go with Bill Russell.
Bill Russell is incorrect.
Wow. Well, this is going to suck.
I want to say he had 46 at one point. Here's the reason I gave you 9, because I knew you would say Bill Russell. So I was like, let me not be an unfair, you know what, and have you try to guess stuff that's not going to make sense. So.
I'm just looking up if a certain player played for the Celtics, and I'm not getting this.
Don't look it up. Because in case it shows up suggested search results, just ask me and I will tell you, because I probably know. If not, I'll find out. He did not. He was an Atlanta Hawk. He did not play for the Celtics. If he did, it wasn't for. He was known for.
I'm thinking of someone else. Then.
That's a free hint. After that, there's no more hints. It's the Boston Celtics.
Well, let's loop back around to Larry Legend.
Larry Bird is not correct.
Oh gosh.
By the way, if that is incorrect, because I'm probably he definitely has a high game in the playoffs. I don't think it's above 50 though. He had 60, I thought, in the playoff game. This is courtesy of StatMuse. So hopefully
There are 6 Celtics who have had 50-point or higher playoff games.
this stat
There
says
aren't that many players all time who have had 50-point or higher playoff
it
games.
says most points in a playoff game in Celtics history. And I have the 5 in front of me. Or 6, sorry. 6, 5 that you haven't said. I'm totally trusting StatMuse here, by the way.
Kevin McHale.
Kevin McHale is incorrect.
Oh, why?
So you need to get, I believe it's 5 of the next. No? 1, 2.
Who the heck did the scoring for the Celtics then?
You've got to get 5 in a row correct to get a point.
Not going to. I'll make that clear.
Do you want me to give you 10 guesses for fun?
Paul Pierce.
Josh.
Yeah.
Paul Pierce is not correct.
Oh, okay. What is happening?
Can I tell you that's the second time on trivia that you've forgotten Paul Pierce? That you've had something to do with Paul Pierce. I love it.
I didn't forget it. I actually guessed it this time.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Sorry. Yeah, that's funny.
Dude,
just for fun.
I don't know anything about what happened in Celtics playoff history.
Just for fun, do you want to just at least try to finish your answers? This is tough, man. This is tough.
Robert Parrish. I don't know. I'm just going to start naming Celtics.
Parrish is a career 13-point per game.
Yeah.
No, Robert Parrish is not correct. I'm sorry, my friend. This has been your first big. We both have had one. It was my G League one, and now you've had your first.
Heck?
You've had your first trivia mishap, I guess we'll say. I'll just give you a hint. So,
are Garnett and Allen either of them either?
I'll give you. So my hint was only one of them on this list. Or sorry, 2 of them out of the 5 left are guys that played before the year 2000. Or I'm sorry, after the year 2000 in our era, 2000 to 2020. 2 of them out of the 5.
Are Garnett and Allen either?
One of them is on there. This is literally just to see if you can get close. Do you want me to just roll through them?
Garnett.
So, yeah, well, at least let you finish out your guesses. Kevin Garnett is not correct.
Ray Allen.
Ray Allen is correct.
Oh, gosh.
I hope StatMuse is right, man. I'm going to feel like an idiot for coming up with a question if they're wrong. I'm going to go to Basketball Reference or something, or I'm going to research Celtics playoff points and just make sure this is correct. Because I'm pretty sure Larry Bird has
a high point. They were wrong. We're doing trivia for me again next week.
I'll run it back next week if this is wrong. Because I'm pretty sure Larry Bird had a really high point per game in playoff, but it might not have been 50 or 60. Final guess, my friend.
Isaiah Thomas.
That is correct. Isaiah Thomas was the second highest. That is correct.
I do vaguely remember him having a 50-point playoff game.
Yeah, Isaiah Thomas was the other recent guy, and he had 53. So, out of 9 guesses, my friend, you got 2 correct. 3 correct.
I myself, I got 3 based on the fact that Larry Bird and Bill Russell weren't on the freaking list.
Yeah, so are you curious who's left? Do you have any guesses left?
I have no idea. I'm worried I'm not going to know who these people are when you say it.
Oh, you are. This is why I'm so ready to post this podcast. The other 50-point performance was Mr. Oldest point guard for the Celtics, or the first one of the era that won a lot of titles with Bill Russell, Mr. Bob Cousy. He was the scorer, one of the first men to dribble with their left hand consistently. The second, or the next one, and fourth was Sam Jones, one of the Jones brothers or one of the Jones players for the Celtics back then. They were not brothers. He had 51. Ray Allen, you had at 51. That was correct. Isaiah Thomas. And then, come on, man. John Havlicek? John Havlicek. Probably the second greatest. In terms of scoring, he's the second best player in Celtics history. Honestly, he might be the second best player in Celtics history, period. I don't – you could ask a Celtics fan of different age groups, and that's probably a different answer. But John Havlicek's a really good Celtic, and he was number 1 with 54 points. What a question, right? Yeah? No, you don't like our friends at StatMuse anymore, do you?
No, I don't.
I'm going to make sure that this was a correct question, and I should have been
I'm
research
looking
before.
at it now. I think
Just
it's
look
the
up
correct question.
as we come back out, as we outro this episode. Make sure
I'm
that Larry
pretty sure
Bird.
it is.
Look up Larry Bird's highest career playoff point. You can use StatMuse if you want. Look it up.
It's not over 50. So.
Oh, okay. So this is all right. Well, shout out to our friends at StatMuse. Josh still holds a 0.5 lead, 8.5 to 8. I'm going to look next week to probably have only 1 point. If Josh is going to be bitter a week later, I'm going to have 1 point and to see if I can gain the 0.5 lead back. So
I'm going to need you to start coming up with trivia questions on your own.
I have a lot of them saved up. Don't you worry.
Are they all from StatMuse?
Some of them, yes.
Yeah, there we go.
All right. Well, anything else before we round this out? This late Tuesday draft lottery evening.
Larry had 5 games between 40 and 49 points in the playoffs.
You're just trying to make sure.
I've made sure. I'm just saying,
that's funny. Larry Legend couldn't
he got
get more
close
than
5 times.
It's crazy. All right. Well, I'll round us out. This has been the 2 Pointers Podcast. I'm Trevor.
And I'm wrong. And we will see you soon.